Welcome to That Pennsylvania Witch podcast. My name is Katelyn Dawn. Thanks for joining us today. Hello, thank you for tuning in to That Pennsylvania Witch for our Autumn Equinox episode. Autumn Equinox is always interesting to me because of the ongoing debate in the pagan community over its name. And rather than rambling for half an hour about Welsh gods, I'd prefer to discuss pagan-adjacent autumn traditions. My Welsh pronunciation isn't the best anyway. This year, the autumn equinox falls on September 22nd, and as a Wiccan, Druid, pagan amalgamation myself, I practice my own personal version of the Sabbats, cross quarters, and quarters. Most pagans, and most Wiccans, follow the Wheel of the Year, which is divided into 8 seasonal celebrations. 4 of these, Yule, Ostara, Litha, and Mabon, align with either a solstice or an equinox. The other 4 seasonal celebrations, Samhain, Imbolc, Beltane, and Lughnasadh, are midpoints within a season, also known as cross quarters. And I can't forget about my Druid practice. Druids, of course, fall under that pagan umbrella too. Instead of Mabon, most Druids refer to the autumn equinox as Alban Elvid, or Light of the Water. There are a few variations on the pronunciation. It still represents the second of the 3 harvest festivals. Now, the day and night are equally balanced, as they were at the time of the spring equinox. But soon the nights will grow longer and winter will be upon us. So this is the time of the second harvest, a time to reflect on the work we've done or the seeds that we've sown and tended. This time of year for me personally is a kind of a culmination, and so the time for our yearly review is upon us. Leading up to Samhain is the busiest time of year for me, and I'm sure it is for many of you listening as well. And not too long ago, our ancestors would have been scrambling to prepare for the winter, gathering firewood or peat for warmth, reinforcing and insulating their dwellings, ensuring that their families and livestock had enough to get them through winter. Since we are just animals after all, we must have some remnants of this instinct lingering in our mitochondrial DNA. I notice it every year around this time. My family, friends, students, and loved ones are usually either experiencing an anxiety-riddled existence, rushing to finish out the summer, or rushing into the fall season, or they are enjoying the gradual shifts, the change of the leaves, the end of the summer gardening season, taking time to bask in the last warm moments in a mindful and joyful way. Of course, I tend to zip back and forth between both of these approaches. Some years are better than others. And about 10 years ago, I recognized this pattern of panic and realized that as animals, we must be feeling this sense of urgency to prepare for winter. I know I can feel it. It's a quickening. But unlike the feeling of spring, it's a sense of urgency rather than excitement. Over the years, I found that doing small things to prepare for the change in season helps me chill out a little bit. It definitely helps my family too, though they would probably never admit it. On a spiritual level, it's time to think back and review on the year, tie up loose ends, start thinking about goals and ideas for the new year. And in this way, we are still like our ancestors, taking inventory and thinking back on our accomplishments, reflecting, making sure that we're ready for the winter. The autumn equinox is a fantastic time for gratitude as well. Lots of folks I know call it the Witch's Thanksgiving. And I truly do love the Wheel of the Year, because attuning to the cycles and rhythms of nature is a lovely, connected, and mindful approach. These cycles help me to feel grounded and aligned, and it helps me avoid any lingering compulsion to hoard firewood or overzealously can 60 containers of peaches, since neither of these practices would really be beneficial to me. Gathering some firewood for the occasional bonfire or cold evening, and putting up some seasonal fruits and veggies is a happy medium. So far, that has helped my hunter-gatherer brain stay relatively sated and less twitchy during the fall months. Fall and spooky season is my favorite time of year for so many reasons. While it's a dangerous time of year to Google the words apple or pumpkin, because you'll likely clog up your feed or history with 3,000 different blogs about apple picking, here in Pennsylvania, we love our apples and pumpkins. If you're not a Pennsylvania native, you've got to give apple butter a try, by the way. It is fantastic on cinnamon raisin bread. My husband is usually less than thrilled about the concept of paying more for apples that we have to pick ourselves than just buying them from the same farm stand. This is probably because he generally ends up lugging the apples through the orchard while I huff and puff my way up and down the hills. And usually, inevitably, I go missing while I identify cool rocks and plants, and he gets left holding the bag. It does always end up being a really good time, though, and it's one of my favorite pagan-adjacent fall traditions. I am passionate about these experiences. They help me forge a connection to the land, and supporting local farms is very important to me. I remind my Taurian husband of this, so that he's more agreeable to the apple toting and the trudging around the orchards. Pennsylvania is ranked 4th in apple growing in the United States, with more than 21,000 acres of apple orchards. Because of the Appalachian Mountains, which cut diagonally through the state from east to west, Pennsylvania orchards get protection from harsh weather from the steep mountain ridges, especially those trees that are on southern slopes. Rolling hillsides with deep, well-drained soil is ideal for apple orchard success. The farms in Pennsylvania are so important to protect, support, and preserve. And growing up, one of my best friends had a family farm that had a small pumpkin patch, which I remember visiting. There are plenty of farm stands here in central Pennsylvania with locally grown pumpkins, gourds, corn shocks, straw bales. And the straw bales are also not something my husband is really psyched about, since he's more concerned about the many pieces of straw that end up getting stuck in my car in various places. There are also pumpkin patches nearby with pumpkin cannons, corn mazes. There's nothing like a cool, crisp fall day filled with these activities, and ending with a steamy kitchen full of the spicy scent of baking apples. In northwestern Pennsylvania, in the Pennsylvania wilds, it's the time of year where if you're not familiar with the Pennsylvania elk herd, you might be terrified in the woods. Hearing an elk bugle is pretty damn scary if you're not used to it. I'm not podcast tech savvy enough yet, but if I were, I would include a recording of this for you. I do, however, encourage you to find a recording of this noise. It's definitely eerie, but it's also beautiful. I spend as much time as I can in the Pennsylvania wilds. When I was little, it was a lot different. There was one single road that led up to our family cabin, and there were several runs and hollers that were unpaved. Now there's several more roads cutting across the woods, but there are still plenty of unpaved runs and hollers. There is, of course, a great debate about what is considered to be the Appalachian region. A lot of Southerners say that anything north of the Mason-Dixon line is not true Appalachia, and that's okay. I won't argue, but I have been throughout the Appalachian Mountains, and the energy is very similar. It's still that beautiful, ancient, strong, and steady force. But it is a fantastic time of year to visit the Pennsylvania wilds. The magical and mundane parts of my life have no real separation anymore because my practice is so much a part of my entire life. I think this is something that happens organically as you get older or as you practice for an extended time, because these daily rituals become almost like muscle memory, and they really should. I think your own personal practice or your own belief system should be something that fits right in with your daily activities. And no worries if you haven't gotten there yet. It always happens eventually. So when I'm in the apple orchard with my family, or when I'm carving a pumpkin, or when I'm hiking or kayaking, I am doing a mundane activity, but I'm also meditating and connecting or speaking with the land spirits, giving offerings. Sometimes I will do an entire elaborate ritual. Other times I will just mindfully walk and connect. There's no right or wrong way to practice, and nobody should accuse you of not being witchy enough just because you don't do some elaborate theatrical ritual. My witch friends often have a great fall equinox celebration. Also, we have an event called Herb Fest around this time of year, where we harvest the herbs grown throughout the summer, bless them, and share them. We do other things in the fall too, but the late summer and early fall activities tend to be focused on the harvest. Recently, I made incense cones with my coven, which will also likely become a tradition. It is a great way to use up some of your stale herbs, and it's a great mindful activity. As usual, we had several missteps, and that's okay. Today, I officiated my first pagan-leaning wedding, and it was absolutely beautiful. As I was driving to the ceremony, I noticed the first leaves were changing. Usually the black gum trees begin in late August, while others, like dogwood, they start to change in mid-September. So I noticed the change in the dogwood trees and in some of the maples that were starting to become red and orange. Oaks are the last to turn and will wait until long after the maples have already shed leaves. Driving through the state in early to mid-fall is breathtaking. On the way to this wedding, I was thinking about how every hand fasting I had ever attended, even my own, someone showed up with a kilt. But even at non-pagan weddings, when someone incorporates a hand fasting into their ceremony, for some reason, every one I've attended, there was always someone at that event that showed up in a kilt. And today was no different. I didn't notice it at first, but there was indeed a gentleman wearing a kilt. And when he stood up, I had to smile to myself. It's the time of year for synchronicities, and I always look forward to Samhain too this time of year. We have our bonfires and we honor our ancestors. Honoring ancestors is probably one of my absolute favorite traditions. I do ancestor work or ancestor veneration all year, but in September I dig out old pictures and make a big space for remembering my loved ones who have traveled on. And the great thing about ancestor work is that it's gratifying. It's also extremely effective in bolstering your connection to spirit. My ancestor altar is a place where I honor my loved ones, but there are many ways to do this. I honor ancestors of place, tradition. I honor my adoptive as well as my biological ancestors. And there are many beliefs and practices surrounding ancestor veneration. I'll ramble more about this closer to Samhain, but it is a huge part of my personal practice. The energy of autumn feels like nostalgia. Whispers of memories and the past almost float on the air. I personally have no issue with the cliche statement about the veil being thin this time of year. It does feel that way. Though I think that perhaps it's because we're so attuned to the cycle of death and rebirth that our senses are heightened, and we become more aware of the cycles of change. And the forest always exudes a sense of ancient wisdom, but it's especially pronounced in the fall. Many years back, there was a local harvest festival at a beautiful property called Spoutwood Farm in Glen Rock, Pennsylvania. The farm is still around. They are a 501c3, and they do amazing things for the community. But this harvest festival was a beautiful event, featuring eco-friendly vendors, pagan celebrations and tradition, presentations, old-fashioned apple cider, crafts for the kids. And it was, as a pagan event should be, very earth-centered. It's become difficult to find larger events like this. There are small ones, but the events at this place were truly magical. So when the nights get cool and the days get shorter, I decorate for fall, go apple picking, preserve food, make seasonal recipes, support local agriculture, especially the farmers who practice earth-friendly approaches. I love to hike in the woods and kayak, have fall parties, carve pumpkins, watch cheesy horror movies. It's hard not to love fall, living in a deciduous forest. The colors of the changing leaves are breathtaking, and the crisp fall air with the occasional hint of wood smoke or the earthy scent of fall leaves. It's just beautiful. It's probably pretty clear at this point that fall is my favorite. But I would love to hear about your traditions. What do you do this time of year? How do you incorporate your magical side into your mundane celebrations? Thank you for joining us today. Happy fall.